Welcome everybody to the 37th episode of Comic DNA, on which we will be discussing iZombie, Volume 2, written by Chris Roberson and illustrated by Mike Allred, first published by Vertigo Comics in 2011. I am Aaron Walther, and with me today is my iZombie reading friend, Mr. Luke Thompson-Moritz. Luke, so glad to have you back on the show.
Thank you, it is nice to be back.
So it's been like a year since we read the first volume of iZombie.
Yeah, wow, yeah, it really has.
What's taking so long?
The show? I was waiting for the show to finish.
Fair enough. Yeah. Because, when we last talked about it, there was a lot of anticipation for the upcoming TV adaptation.
There was a little bit of, like a sizzle reel for CW's upcoming shows, and that was the first look at it around when we did that book. And me watching shows on the CW, it piqued my interest a little bit, so I figured now would be a good time to talk about it.
Sure. So, we decided to read the second volume, because we both liked the first volume.
Oh, of course.
Of course. I am a huge, as we said in the previous podcast, I am such a huge fan of Mike Allred, and I became a big fan of Chris Roberson after reading iZombie, and I've since read a few other things that he's done. But, so for this episode, we're going to talk about the continuation of the iZombie series, and we're going to talk about the television adaptation that has...
It's about to start its second season.
The second season is just going to start, like, next week.
Yep.
Yeah, and the first season was very well received, as I understand.
Enough to get a second season.
I mean, good enough to get a second season, for sure.
Yeah.
So, we're going to talk about the comic series and the television series, and we're going to talk about them both independently and also how they relate to each other as like an adaptation of a comic book series. But first, let's talk a little bit about the comic, because this is a podcast about comics. So
last time I checked, it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's in
I haven't been here in a while.
Yeah,
so.
It's been like 6 episodes since I last saw you. But so iZombie Volume 2. Volume 2 mostly is just a bunch of each issue is just kind of giving us a little bit more backstory on some of the characters. It does.
The first book does just throw us in.
Yeah, the first book just kind of opens up with this. I mean, if you can listen to the podcast, we talk about it a lot. But it starts off with this murder mystery setup, and you have Gwen, the main character. She's a zombie. She works in a graveyard and she eats brains. And when she eats the brain, she gets the person's memories. And so when she eats the brain of a murdered person, she can help solve their murder because she can see who is murdering them, ostensibly, depending on the situation. And Gwen has a penchant for solving mysteries because she was a fan of like old pulp stories and stuff. And that's like your basic setup of iZombie. And then it gets into this as the story goes along, it kind of sheds its kind of basic setup and opens up into this larger story where we get a lot of supporting characters, and there's a much grander thing going on other than just one zombie solving murder mysteries. But there is still it still maintains a mystery because Gwen herself is basically like an amnesiac. She doesn't really know much about her past. She doesn't remember anything from when she was alive other than little bits and pieces, depending on whether or not she's eaten a brain recently.
Right, which is funny because then it comes into, she's solving these people's mysteries of the brains she's eating, but also she's trying to piece her own together.
Yes.
So it adds that little bit of extra depth to it, and that's, that connects us to the character a little more.
And that's really...
I want to know what happens.
Exactly. And that's kind of the big, I guess you could say the plot twist or the big, revealing thing in Volume 2 is that she eats the brain of somebody who died, and it's the mother of her best friend when she was a kid. And so she starts being overwhelmed with these memories of her life, which she had kind of forgotten, and she's sort of starting to get little connections. She's making connections back to her previous life when she was alive. And apart from that, that's sort of the... That's Gwen's plot, yeah. And then apart from that, we get some more story about Spot, the were terrier, you get his, like, one whole issue is just his backstory of how he became a were-terrier and how he met Gwen. And then the other story you get, or another issue, is all about
Ellie.
Ellie, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Ellie, how Ellie became a ghost and her life before she became a ghost. And yeah, so this arc is mostly just about expanding the backstory of, like, the principal cast: Gwen, Ellie, and Spot. I keep calling him Spot. He has a real name, but Spot is just
Scott.
what Scott. It's Scott, yeah, of course, because it sounds like Spot, and that's funny. That's good.
He's a Scottish Terrier.
Yeah, it's so perfect. Oh my gosh.
Oh man, the writing in this book.
I love it. I absolutely love the writing in this book. Chris Roberson.
I'm trying not to gush about it too much because we did, what was iZombie, our third episode?
It was like our third episode, yeah.
Yeah, so most of that episode was just us gushing about how good the writing was and how amazing the art was, because it is, but
it's so clever.
Yeah, it is. And you see it a lot with, like, Gwen's inner dialogue. Oh, just a spoiler, I might accidentally call Gwen Liv and Liv Gwen just accidentally.
Just interchangeably.
I hate that it's a thing, but whatever, I don't care.
Well,
but if it happens,
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we will. But no, you see a lot of the wittiness of. You see it a lot with Gwen, just how she talks to other people, how she her inner monologue with it, and it's so well done, and it feels like an authentic, like, organic character. It doesn't just feel like a placeholder character. So
yeah. Yes, I think that the book remains, or it continues being a really clever book. You get a little, like, the first volume really opened up with the concept. Like, it did. I love. We talked about this in the first episode, of course, but I love the way they set up how this world has zombies, or not zombies. I mean, sorry, how the world of iZombie has these different monsters in it, and they're all explained through the concept of the oversoul and the undersoul, which is
right.
The philosophy of, like, the two parts of a person, and it applies so perfectly to all the classic movie monsters, and how they're presented in this comic is just so fun and clever. I'm just gonna keep saying the word clever because I think it's a clever book.
Mm-hmm. It's such a interesting way to deconstruct a very strongly established, like, extended monster universe.
It's a good way of, like, bringing it all together.
Yeah,
into a tied universe.
They easily could have just done a regular werewolf. They easily could have just done a ghost who was a friend of Ellie, or who was a friend of Gwen's, but they added that extra layer of unique character to them, of making them a were-terrier, which, what other kind of a book is going to do that?
No, I love the were-terrier thing. It's great.
Oh, and, Scott is such a likable character.
Yeah.
Especially after this arc of books. You get to learn a little bit more about him, as we said, and it was so nice being able to actually get some depth to these characters other than just being sidekicks, to Gwen's main story. There is multiple stories going on in this, and in this specific book, I never really felt that I was, missing a part of the story yet. So.
Yeah, I kind of like what we hinted at. This book, like the second volume, which consists of issues 6 through 12, is mostly backstory, a little bit of setup for the larger arc. Like, we're introduced to the character of Galatia, who, in keeping with all of the different monster types, she's Frankenstein's monster, or more specifically, I guess you could say Frankenstein's wife. The female Frankenstein. And, she's a mad scientist, sort of, a professor at the college, and secretly, this scientist who's working on some kind of big, epic, evil plot that's, like, of a Lovecraftian nature. Like, we were just talking about Lovecraftian-style storytelling in the previous episode, Skull Kicker's book, how Jim Zub was incorporating Lovecraftian mythos. And, Chris Roberson is doing it too in iZombie. There's a big Lovecraftian mythos about involving the story of Galatia and what.
I was gonna say, I wish I could remember the creature's name, but
yeah, I can't.
It's got 2 X's in it.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's some elder creature, some elder space being, cosmic.
Yeah, they have a big splash page of it of Galatia explaining everything, and it's it stayed relatively cryptic in this book.
Mm-hmm.
You know that she's trying to do something with it. It involves some sort of.
Well, Amon talks about how it's the end of. It'll just kill everything. It's the ultimate end. It'll just destroy everything, and Galatia is crazy for thinking she can control that.
And she keeps thinking Amon is too close-minded.
Exactly. He's not open-minded enough to deal with it, which is I like that because that's classic moral relativity in your characters. It's not just it's ultimate good and ultimate evil, and I'm evil because I want to be evil. It's she's tampering with forces she doesn't understand, and she sees herself as being bold and innovative for doing it, and other people are more conservative and they say, no, you shouldn't do that. There's a reason that it's.
Yeah, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. So. Yeah. It's nice little stuff. It's stuff that obviously that's what builds later in the series. That's kind of what the main arc is about. But in the second volume, we mostly just get character stuff.
Yeah,
and I'm not complaining about that because my favorite thing about this book is the characters and the supporting cast.
Oh,
specifically.
Even more than half of the charm is the colorful cast of side characters.
Yes.
Gwen is a very likable main character, but having that troop of other characters around her just adds to everything,
Mm-hmm.
And that's I wanna wait to talk about the show.
Yeah,
but that is an aspect of the show that
we'll talk about that when we start talking about the TV show adaptation. Yeah. But let's talk a little bit more about the series, the comic.
Oh, of course.
So the first, the book opens up, the first, I think, is it 2 issues that are about Scott and his past living with his grandpa?
I think it's just the entire
It's probably just the issue. Because that's another thing that I really like about this series, and this can't be stressed enough, is I love how it is written to be read issue by issue. It does a good job of that. I think these days very few comics do a good job of putting out substantial issues that you can just read one 22-page story a month and wait for the next month to read the next one. Most books are written to be read as a trade paperback. Mm-hmm. And I'm not complaining about that because I as a reader now am almost exclusively just a trade paperback reader. I just prefer reading big books.
There is books that I'm waiting for till they go to trade paperback.
Yeah, exactly. I'm almost exclusively like that. But iZombie was such a when I was reading it when it came out, and I just loved how well it was done issue to issue. It's strung along. It's in a way it's classic comic book storytelling because it strings along this overarching story, but each issue is basically just a smaller story about a character.
Yep. Especially in this book.
Yeah, particularly with this volume. Yeah.
Yeah, because 2 of the 6 issues, 6 issues. 2 of the 6 issues are character specific.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Just little standalone stories just about the character.
Mm-hmm. And that really, really ties back into how important the supporting cast is.
Mm-hmm.
The creators wanted to give the reader a little bit of a look inside these supporting characters' lives. So
So the first issue, it basically the book is the first issue is a standalone story about Scott. The next 4 issues are the kind of the ongoing story about Gwen, and then the final issue, issue 12, last chapter of the second volume, is a standalone issue about Ellie. And I really liked the Scott issue, the Spot issue.
Yeah.
He's a good character, but I love the development between him and his grandpa.
Oh, that is phenomenal.
Yeah. And it's such a good it's such a good story, and I mean, like I just like the basic plot of the story is that Scott's parents died when he was pretty young, and I forget, did they say why?
It was just some freak accident, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so his parents die, and he goes to live with his grandpa, and he grows up, and he finds out that his grandpa is the voice of this famous cartoon character, what is it, the chimp?
Yeah, it's a chimp. That's relevant.
Well, it is relevant,
chimp.
but it's like it's a cartoon character that's like Mickey Mouse, except he's a monkey, it's Chimpy something. I really should have written this down. This is the worst. This is the worst episode of Comic Day we've ever recorded because I have not written down a single note for this entire episode. I'm totally winging this one, but it's okay because Luke has lots of notes written down. So as we were saying, Scott goes to live with his grandpa, who is the voice of like this world famous cartoon monkey, like a Mickey Mouse type of a thing, and it's such a good he's such a relatable character to comic book readers. Scott is, because it's a kid. He grows up. He loves cartoons. He loves comics. He loves toys, and that's like a great connection between him and his grandpa as a kid, because his grandpa's like, oh, I was the voice of this cartoon character, and that's like an instant connection for them. But you kind of learn that the grandpa, he doesn't actually care about any of it. Like it was a job. It was just a job, exactly. You know, and he always, and
he kind of resents it.
He kind of resents it. He always wanted to be an actor, and he was stuck being a cartoon voice actor. And so as they grow up, this is like the one thing that connects them. At first, when Scott is really young, it's like a good connection. But as they grow up, it sort of divides them further and further apart, because Scott is basically, he's just a geek, and so he loves cartoons, and he kind of grows up and he keeps getting more involved in comic books and Dungeons and Dragons and other geek stuff. And the grandpa does not care about that, and in fact, he starts trying to overparent Scott about that. He wants him to be a normal person. Go out and meet girls and get into trouble. Just sit in your room all day playing video games. And the story goes on. They grow apart, and eventually the grandpa dies, and Scott's all troubled by it. And I did like this reveal. Scott is narrating this story of his history, and then you see him standing there in front of a brick wall, just kind of narrating it. And then finally, when he gets to the end, when he's talking about his grandpa dying, and it kind of pans out, and you see he's in the zoo, because that was one place that he, as a kid, used to love to go with his grandpa. And he's at the zoo, and he's talking to just a chimpanzee in the animal house, the monkey house. And he finishes telling the story, and he's like, well, whatever. Thanks for listening, I guess, you dumb monkey. And as he's walking away, the monkey starts talking to him, and he's like, oh. The monkey, the chimp, I should say. He's a chimpanzee, not a monkey.
Yes.
He's an ape. And he says something to the effect of oh, you never shut up. And that's such a good, again, when I talk about how clever this thing is, the grandpa, his soul gets stuck in the chimpanzee, which is just, perfectly little set up, because he was the voice of the monkey or the voice of the chimp, and now he is a chimp. But it still ties into the whole oversoul, undersoul setup of how these monsters exist. And the grandpa in the body of a chimp becomes a very fun character.
I wrote in my notes about the character of the grandpa as the chimp now, and I said, I never knew how bad I wanted to see a chimp in a bathrobe smoking a cigar, but now that I have, it all came flooding to me at once.
It's a great visual.
It's such a perfect visual of the grandpa just sitting there, bathrobe open, on the couch with a cigar and a glass of whiskey, and it's astounding. It's such a good visual gag. Mm-hmm. Does he stay relevant for the rest of the story?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, good. Glad to see that, because even if that would have been like a Sam and Max-esque visual gag where it's just there for a few panels and then he just kind of gets forgotten about. Mm-hmm. That would have still been funny, but I'm glad he stays relevant.
Yeah, no, he remains a supporting character.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, the first issue just kind of wraps up with the grandpa.
Yeah, it's really
with Scott.
It's really mostly just kind of set up for further stuff.
Yeah.
That's going to happen or keep happening in the book. But like I said, it's again what I really like about this book structurally. It worked really well as an issue by issue read. Like you just get this is your Scott story. Here's a Gwen story. Here's an Ellie story, and it still feels really fluid.
Mm-hmm. They all still tie together really well. They lead into each other and hand off to each other really well.
Yeah.
It feels really organic in a show in a comic about movie monsters living in the real world. Organic is really not the first thing I'd think of, but it feels real. You know, it feels like these people could just be hanging out at this diner, just having a cup of coffee, minding their own business. So. Oh, this book, man!
It's good.
Yeah. So the first issue, yeah, like you said, is really just set up, and then it leads into what
the main Gwen story.
Yeah. How she goes on a date with Horatio, right?
Yes.
Or is that
she does. It's the mix of like she's eaten the brain of the dead old lady who is the mother of her childhood friend who she hasn't seen forever and who thinks. The childhood friend thinks that she's dead because she died. Gwen, she
doesn't know this yet, though. She eats the brain of someone who was killed in a house fire, and the body was burned beyond, recognition.
Right.
And yeah, she eats the brain and finds out, oh my God, it's the mom of my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then that is the main overarching plot of this book.
Right.
Of her trying to meet the daughter again, see if the daughter even knows that she's dead, and yeah, all my notes are written about the show.
No, that's okay. Yeah, because I mean, it's basically, as we said, it's just this book is mostly character stuff, so as we said, Gwen's story is she's having to confront somebody from her past. And is just dealing with that while also trying to move on with her future by going on this date with Horatio, who is a monster hunter, but Horatio, the monster hunter, doesn't know that Gwen is a zombie. So it becomes almost kind of this I don't want to say sitcom-esque situation of all these pieces are all set up to fall if one person said the wrong thing at the wrong time. It would all unravel.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just nice. I don't know. It's because I don't want to call it drama because it's too fun.
I mean, it does feel like there is a salient threat
of
Gwen being discovered.
Oh, for sure.
Because she's just trying to live normal.
Yeah,
and
she's trying to get on with what's left of her life.
Yeah, what's left of her afterlife.
Yes. Bow. And Horatio, Horatio and Diogenes are continuing their story of they're just in Eugene, Oregon, where this is all taking place, where Gwen lives, looking for vampires, and they sort of come to an agreement with the vampires after the vampires kick the crap out of them.
Yeah.
And the vampires. It basically kind of ends with this cliffhanger of the vampires making a truce with the monster hunters and being like, why are you even bothering us? Don't you know about the zombies in town?
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, that's the thing is, they, Diogenes and Horatio encounter the vampires. They beat them, and they kill one of the vampires. So then the vampires kidnap Diogenes and push them into a corner. And then that is where, that's where the whole... You didn't know about the zombies thing goes on, and I could just hear the bum bum bum
right
at the end of that one.
And that's your basic cliffhanger going into Volume 3. And then the final issue of the book is a standalone story about Ellie, which I really like that issue.
It is not the final issue. It is the second to last.
Is the second to last issue?
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure it was issue 12.
No, it is the last
Yeah,
issue. I'm
it's
sorry.
the last issue.
That's why I was so confused about it, because it was such a. They had a guest artist.
It's a guest
on it.
artist. It's drawn by Gilbert Hernandez, and I forgive you, Luke. I know you have no idea who that is, but Gilbert Hernandez is one part of the kind of comic book famous Los Bros Hernandez, who are the three brothers responsible for Love and Rockets, which is one of the most popular, beloved, long-running indie comics going on. Like started in the 80s. It's definitely an alt comic book. It's an alternative comic book, and it's like I said, you don't really have much understanding about the deep world of comic books, So I forgive you for not knowing who that is, but
I'm so thankful.
Yeah. But no, it's really cool to see Gilbert Hernandez drawing this issue about Ellie. It's because the book, so much of this book is so Mike Allred. Like, we haven't really talked about the art, but Mike, it's such a Mike Allred book. Like, his pop art style is what really sells a lot of it for me. I
mean, when you first recommended me the book, we met through work, and I said, hey, I'm looking for other comics to read, blah, blah, blah. This was the first book you recommended to me, and it was a home run. Because I saw how I flipped the book open and saw all these, bright, colorful, washed out colors, and it's just, it blew my mind, really.
Yeah.
The cover was already fascinating enough, but, I'm not really into the zombie genre as a whole, really.
Right.
This was such an interesting deconstruction of it that it hooked me right in.
Oh yeah, it's a great book, and Mike Allred is a great artist, and the whole style and the whole personality of the book is, I don't want to say it's just Mike Allred, because what it really is, it's a beautiful synthesis of the story that Chris Roberson is telling. And he blends it in with Mike Allred's style so perfectly. Like, all these characters just... the world of iZombie is just beautiful. And it's... Like we talked about how, Chris Roberson's versions of these monsters are fun. And a lot of that works because of Mike Allred's art style. Like, the way he draws the Were-Terrier is just beautiful,
As beautiful as it can be.
Exactly, yeah. A humanoid Scottish Terrier.
Yes.
But yeah, so it is cool to see Gilbert Hernandez draw it, because he's also a really good artist. Little different than Mike Allred. He's not quite
just a smidge.
Just a smidge. He's not quite as stiffly pop art as Mike Allred is. Like, Mike Allred uses so many thick lines around everything to make everything. I don't want to keep repeating the word, but all of his characters and the images really pop off the page because there's such a thickness and a weight to a lot of it. And Gilbert Hernandez, conversely, uses very thin lines the way he draws his characters. It's all very thin stuff. So it's a lighter issue. Like, it doesn't, it doesn't look. It's not Mike Allred, of course. I would have to actually check the issue's credits, which, of course, I'm not going to do. But of course.
In true fashion.
Yes. But the colors are very similar to the colors of the regular book.
Yeah, there are a lot of muted colors, very very light yellows, and
Yeah. It's still very bright, colorful issue.
Oh yeah.
I would say not muted. But I didn't check to see if it was the regular colorist who. Probably not, because I'm almost positive that Mike Allred's issues are colored by his wife, Laura Allred, who is also part of what makes Mike Allred's pages so great, is that she is a really good colorist, and she meshes with his style perfectly.
Yeah, it's Laura Allred.
It is Laura. Okay,
colors.
So Laura Allred does do the colors. Good.
Yeah.
That explains why it's so uniform. So, in conclusion, yes, the reason that it still looks really good and kind of ties in, like it still meshes really well with Mike Allred's issues, is because it is colored by Laura Allred, so it still has that same pop coloring. It's just different, line work. Still beautiful, still looks great.
Yeah, still gorgeous.
Yeah, I love it.
You see big differences, like nothing in the Gilbert Hernandez issue is like nothing really has like heavy shadows, or like you said, they have very thin lines.
Correct.
So that's what was so jarring to me, because when I first pulled the issue open, I didn't know that it was a guest artist until a couple pages in, and I go, "Well, this is
like this is obviously different."
Yeah, this is different. I love it though. It's very. The closest thing that I can think to compare it to is Durf. It looks a little like.
That's a fair comparison. Not necessarily in style, because Gilbert Hernandez does not draw like Durf, but they are both alternative comics cartoonists.
Yeah, that is just the style that I guess I was picturing, because I, like you said, I'm not very familiar with many different artists.
I mean, the thing is, it's like most comic book fans aren't familiar with alt comics or alternative comics or anything like that. So somebody that's not even like, a casual comic book fan would not really be aware of it.
Right.
But yeah, so that's a fun issue, but again, like,
it's also pretty deep.
Oh yeah,
it really, because that was one of my first questions early on, was why is she stuck as a ghost in the 60s? And obviously said because she died in the 60s, but it's nice seeing it fleshed out a little bit.
Gwen's story is sad. I mean, because it's all about her dad.
Ellie's story is
Gwen. Yeah, Ellie's story is sad.
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, well, I mean,
you hear how much her father loved her, and then
his dad, he's a World War II vet, and it's just a classic story of a guy who was shattered by war. Like, he survived, but he didn't really survive. He comes back as a different person.
He was a ghost.
And that's the sort of the poetic. Like, there's a lot of
use
stuff.
That symbolism.
Yeah, there's a lot of like poetic symbolism throughout iZombie, and that's a perfect example of like Gwen is a ghost. So naturally, like when you get her backstory, I keep saying Gwen. Ellie is a ghost,
you do.
And so her backstory is poetically described as her dad is seen like a ghost-like person, like he's not really alive, like her mom describes him as haunting their house because a part of him was left in the Philippines or wherever they were, wherever he saw combat.
Right.
And again, that's just sort of like the poetic style of this book, and it's sad, it's tragic. His dad is super overprotective. Yeah, her dad is super overprotective of her for her whole childhood because
won't let her do anything.
Yeah, she's the only thing that makes him feel alive. And then she finally has enough of it as a young woman blossoming into adulthood, and she leaves and immediately gets run over by a bus. Tragic. Heartbreaking, yes.
Tragic.
Ugh.
That's just sad.
Yeah. But I don't know. There's just something about it. It's part of why I love this comic.
Well, I mean, it just makes you care about her.
Yeah.
Like I said, it takes her from just being a lovable, adorable sidekick to actually having depth and actually having development.
Right.
And then, of course, the last issue of this book ends with Ellie meeting Gwen for the first time.
Yes.
It elaborates on her story. It shows how she died, and it's it's just a big group of ghosts telling stories around the cemetery to each other. That's a funny dynamic. Whatever, that's funny.
I like that too. That Ellie tells stories of comics she read as a kid. Because that's another thing I do love about this series. I don't mean to cut you off too much.
No, that's fine.
Remember your thought. But another thing I do love about iZombie is how comic book focused it is. Like, there's so many references to comics within the comic. It's obviously it's just, I don't know. It's just nice.
I mean, they frequent the comics.
Yeah, the characters, like the character of Scott. He's a big nerd. He frequently goes to a comic book store, and so there's always references to comic books. And because I don't know. Comics are just weird, a weird thing in our culture. Like it's just nice to read a book that's like, yeah, comics are a regular part of what the cast of characters enjoy, but it's not like a joke. It's not like, just like...
They don't like it ironically.
Yeah, they don't like it ironically. It's not like just like a shallow defining characteristic, like, oh, he's the comic book guy, so all he cares about is comic book movies. Like, it's actually about comics. Like, they talk about actual comic book stuff, like classic comics from the 60s. It's not about just being a fanboy. There's like a genuine love of comics throughout this book, like with the characters, and that is one thing that I do. I mean, I as a comic book lover myself, that definitely is something that I'm really partial to.
I'm sure it's refreshing seeing someone go, "Hey, comic books are important, not just because they set up to be made into movies."
Exactly. Yeah.
Like they are a
shows.
legitimate form of literature. It's nice to see them appreciate it a little bit once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, of course, it's not that surprising to find that within a comic book. Like pretty much anybody making a comic book has I don't want to call it unnatural, but an undying. It's a little unnatural, but it's mostly a stubborn, undying love of comics. Like you don't.
Stubborn is definitely
definitely the correct word. Absolutely. You don't make comics without having some sort of mental deficiency. Oh gosh, I don't want to be quoted on that.
Yeah,
the next Roger Wortham trials are gonna nail me to the wall. But yes, so there is a cool There's a cool comic book style to this comic book, and I like it.
Well said.
Yes. So I interrupted your thought.
Small side note before I go back to my original thought. I think the character that Scott meets in the comic store, the blonde guy who's the artist, which ends up being Gwen's
brother. Yep.
Yes. I'm assuming he becomes important aside from being Gwen's brother.
Yes.
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 Okay.
He's
because
character.
That's Gwen's arc. It ends with her going to confront her brother, or not ends her arc, but part of her arc is she goes to try to confront her brother, and she can't.
Right.
She gets nervous and can't.
Correct.
I mean, I don't know how I would go about that. How do I come in and go, hey, I'm not dead.
Right.
What's up?
Yeah. And that's kind of like Gwen's arc throughout this comic is sort of somebody who's trying to find their way back into their life.
Because I mean, that's the whole thing, is she's just trying to live her life like nothing changed, but just adjusting as required.
Right, exactly. So in many ways, it could be said that Gwen is a trauma survivor. Like she's somebody who experienced a huge trauma in their life.
Oh, definitely.
I think death qualifies as a huge trauma. But I mean, outside of the actual plot of the story, I mean, I'm talking about thematically. Gwen is somebody who has experienced a huge trauma in her life, and there's a lot of things that are left unsaid that she doesn't remember, doesn't know, is purposely blocking out, or has just forgotten. And she's trying to move on with her life when she very clearly needs to deal with these issues. Thematically, that works really well, because that's why Gwen feels like such a relatable character, because it's like this is things that people have to deal with. But literally within the comic, she died and now she's a zombie. And
speaking of which, it hasn't shown how she's died yet.
No, it has not.
That's such an interesting way to string the reader along,
right?
Because like we were saying, it does just throw you in the first book, and it expects you to just kind of suspend your disbelief and go, okay, our main character is a zombie.
See, that works really well, because Gwen is somebody who, like, as I mentioned, I referred to her earlier as an amnesiac. She's somebody who actually doesn't remember certain things from her past. And the way that works really well in the story is somebody who doesn't remember things from their past doesn't remember that they don't remember things. They're just living their life unaware.
They're just gone.
Yeah, they're just living their life unaware that there's a thing that they don't know. So the story works really well. You're just kind of thrown into it, and you're like, okay, here's Gwen. I'm sort of understanding things. And then you're sort of like, I don't actually know a lot about Gwen's backstory. And then as it's being revealed, Gwen doesn't actually know a lot about her backstory, and she's sort of starting to figure it out. So,
yeah, exactly. And that's also the looming threat of the character Amon.
yes,
keeps telling her that I can help you remember
right.
things.
He keeps trying to help her, and he's like,
the devil's advocate kind of thing.
yeah. And yeah, he of course is an important character. Like, he's an important supporting character throughout this whole story. He's intricately tied to the the main arc. But because Gwen is somebody who's basically rejecting his help because she wants to just, be herself, do it herself, and just kind of live her life. And I really like it, of course, because I think it's a great, there's a great sense of suspense and mystery throughout the whole story, the whole book. I like it because it's not just, the mystery strings along without feeling like there's just red herrings all over the place. It's not.
That's what I'm really thankful about.
Yeah, it's not.
Every time it presented us with a cliffhanger or it presented us with a question that we would have, it either made it either set it up that it was going to come in a later issue or just answered it outright.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's not just it doesn't feel like a cheap mystery. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Like when we talked about in the first. When we did our third episode, which was when we reviewed the first volume of iZombie, how it sort of starts off as this very formulaic setup for a mystery where she eats the brain and she's got to solve the mystery of who murdered the person, and then the book ends and it completely sheds that whole structure, that whole all that trope. And the book is no longer every story arc Gwen is going to eat a new brain and try to solve the mystery. And then you actually start to understand that there's this mystery about Gwen herself, and that's what the book kind of becomes about. And it expands.
That's what the book home runs.
Yeah,
it just knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, exactly. It expands and it grows into this larger thing instead of just getting stuck into this Monster of the Week style. Every arc there's a new murder mystery and she's going to solve it.
Can we use that as a segue to go into the show?
Which is the segue. That's the segue I was going to say to the TV show. So, we talked a little bit. We've talked a lot about why we like the comic. So let's talk about the TV show.
Yes, let's talk about this TV show. So, I'm gonna spoil this right outright. I didn't completely hate the show.
Sure.
I'm going to go on record and say I don't think it's a poorly made show.
I don't think there's any reason for anybody to outright hate the show.
I think I have 3 very blanket opinions of the show.
Okay, so tell me everything you thought about the show, why you liked it, why you thought it was okay, and I will then tell you why I hate it.
Rebuttal. Okay.
Despite the fact that there's no reason for anybody to hate the show, I'll tell you why I hate it.
Okay. So my big 3 blanket opinions of the show. It's a perfectly crafted CW show.
Okay.
I think it is absolutely everything that they could make the modern viewer want to watch. It's a show about zombies. It's a show about romance. It's a show about mysteries. People are going to eat it up.
Sure.
And they did. It's not... my second opinion is it's not awful.
Okay.
That's
the greatest compliment a creator could hope for. It is not.
Oh, I know.
It's not awful.
Not terrible. So basically, I think the main cast of Liv, her coworker, and her boss, the detective, I think they all, as actors, at least sort of sell their roles, make them at least likable to the viewer. I think the supporting characters they don't know what they're doing. It felt really cheesy and ham-fisted. All their lines felt really weird.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think the main cast is enough to bring viewers back in. My third, final opinion, I don't think it's a good interpretation of iZombie.
Well, that's really what this kind of comes down to. It's difficult to talk about this TV show because, I have a lot of negative things to say about the TV show, and that will come as absolutely no shock to people.
Anyone who knows
Anybody
you
that knows me,
bit.
all of my friends know that I hate everything. I hate everything
Yes.
except for the stuff that I talk about on my podcast, which now this is 37. This is episode 37, so I've talked about 37 comics that I absolutely love,
Except Fear
more or
Agent.
less. There's a few things that I was a little lukewarm on. Fear Agent, X-Men, God Loves, Man Kills. You weren't on that episode, Luke, but
Yeah.
but still stuff that's worth reading. But when
Yes.
it comes to TV and movies, I'm too critical. Yeah, I'm the worst. That's what everybody says. I am the worst, and I won't deny it. I'm the worst. But yeah, I watched the first 2 episodes of the first season, and as we were saying, it's hard to give a negative review of this because like part of my negative feelings about the TV show do stem from the fact that it is not an adaptation of the comic. Like it's just not. The only connection between the TV show and the comic is that the main character, who is not called Gwen, her name is Olivia, and she does not work in a graveyard, she works at a morgue, and she does not have amnesia and not know anything about her life. She currently still lives with her sister, I think.
It's like a friend
she's
or
still
something.
like a friend.
I think.
She's still connected with her family, and she's still trying to sort of reconnect with her ex-fiancé. So like
who she broke up with
when she
off
became
with.
a zombie.
Correct.
And she, let's see, I'm trying to think of what, like, it's not the same character. The only thing is that when she eats a brain, she gets the memories of the person who died.
And abilities?
And abilities, which is talked about in the comic. It is, a little bit, like, she sort of, like, starts to take on some of their personality traits.
So, as you said in the segue, the comic did an excellent job of not becoming I'm going to eat this brain and solve a murder a week, because that's exactly what they did for the TV show.
I don't want to give a big "I told you so" or say that I'm some kind of genius for calling it, but you do. But I'm going to, because in our very first, or not our very, in our previous episode last year before the show came out, we talked about this book. And I said verbatim, I said it's very easy to see how this would be turned into a show, how they would just take the idea of somebody eats a brain and then gets the person's memories and tries to solve the murder mystery, and each week it's a new murder and so on and so forth. In fact, I know that I said that. I'm going to play the clip right now of me saying exactly what I said last year before the show came on. The first issue sets up like a perfect formula for a TV show. Main character is a zombie. She has to eat a brain once a month, absorbs the information of the brain, and then has to resolve the brain's issues. That's like, bam. That's a pitch you could make at a TV
for
studio.
like an hour-long TV
Yeah, for an
show.
hour-long comedy drama. Like right there. That's all you need. Bam. But that is exactly what I said. I equated it to...
the biggest reason you can equate it to that is the writer of the show, Rob Thomas, wrote the show Veronica Mars.
Yes.
You know anything about Veronica Mars?
Yes, a little bit. I never watched it, but I'm familiar with it.
Neither did I, but from my understanding of the show, this is essentially a zombie-themed Veronica Mars.
And that's really what this kind of comes down to. Really,
the guy Rob Thomas took the name and essentially just kind of ran.
Yeah, he took the name iZombie and he took the smallest setup for the comic. Like, there's nothing in Chris Roberson's writing that shows that like shines through the TV show. Like, it's completely rewritten. Like, it's a different character. The only thing is, like, I guess fortunately for Chris Roberson that he had a copyright on the idea that when a zombie eats the brain, they get their memories, because otherwise they would have been able to just make this show without calling it iZombie. And on that note, I will say that I am very happy that this show exists. Just because it's not for me doesn't mean I don't think that other people can't enjoy it. Anybody that likes the show, I would encourage them to read the comic, because I think the comic is better. But I don't necessarily think that somebody who likes the show will like the comic, because they're so vastly different.
Mm-hmm. The comic goes for a very specific audience. And the show is a very broad bring in viewers.
Well, the way
angle.
my first thought when I watched the pilot, and my first thought while watching that was, God, this is such a TV show.
Yeah, it's such a CW show.
Such a TV show. And it's why cynical assholes, I'm sorry, I don't want to sound too mean, cynical bastards like me, when I complain about...
You can sound mean to yourself. It's okay.
I'm talking about it. Whenever just cynical jerks like me say, like, TV is stupid and I don't like TV, and everybody's like, well, you just don't like anything. Nah, it's not true. I like things. I like some TV, but most TV has a certain style, and it's not for me. And this show is definitely, it's such a TV show. Like, though so many scenes. Like this started to kind of great. I only watched 2 episodes, so I don't want to sound like you know, I'm not making a judgment call on the whole series. You know, I gave
the series 4 episodes. That's
sure,
that is my cardinal rule. I'll give it 3 to 4 episodes. If I'm not into it yet, I drop it with no obligations.
The story for the TV show didn't really grab me either way. It's basically what I expected them to do on a TV show. Like as I said, you know, murder mystery of the week. And then I'll give them credit. They do have like an ongoing plot. It's not very interesting to me of the zombie the guy that turned Liv, which we'll go on that in a minute. The guy that turned Liv into a zombie, unlike Liv's a good person. The guy that turned Liv into a zombie is a bad person, and so he becomes the main antagonist for the first season. Very obviously, he's trying to set up a criminal syndicate where, you know, because he's a zombie and
he's got a monopoly on brains, and he's turning people into zombies
blackmailing
to force them to buy brains.
It's an extortion racket, except, you know, whatever. So, whatever.
For me, it's safe.
It's
like
safe.
It's such a freebie.
It's such a simple TV show plot. Like
it's so unfortunate because the guy who plays the opposing zombie, Blaine, I don't hate him as an actor. I've seen him in things that I've liked him. He's got the charismatic bad guy angle going on, but it's just such a boring character.
Yeah, I thought he was boring. I mean, but then again, like I said, I just think that all the TV style of this show is boring. So many scenes. The scenes start with a character walking into a room. Every character starts a scene with some sarcastic comment, and every scene...
And that seems like they're trying to ham-fist in the writer's humor from the book. And it just feels weird.
Well, it's not. I don't want to sound like a jerk, but I already am sounding like a jerk, so I'm going to just embrace it. That it's not clever the way the comic is clever. Chris Roberson is clever. His writing is clever. This TV show is not clever. It feels very Joss Whedon-y, which to many people that's a compliment, but for me it is an insult. It's just all the characters make dumb, sarcastic, clever jokes. That's how every scene begins. A character makes some sarcastic entrance comment, and then every scene ends with the character exiting, making an exit sarcastic comment. And that's TV writing. That's pacing of a TV show. And I accept that if that's what people want to watch, that's fine. I do not want to watch that. And I get really bored by that because it starts to feel all very generic and it's not actually funny.
Oh, I mean, 3 episodes in and I was calling out scenes to the nines. I just said they're going to discover that it was someone else here. Then they're going to then Liv is going to be rustled into remembering a new event of the murder.
Exactly. All the murder mysteries. It's standard TV show murder mysteries. I mean, it's
what the book initially. What I thought the book was going to be until it shed the formula.
Right. Yeah, the book sets up the formula and then completely destroys it. Whereas, obviously, the TV show embraces it because it has to, because it's a TV show. So if you've watched Psych, you basically understand...
If you've watched Psych, if you watch Veronica Mars, if you watch Supernatural...
Yeah, exactly. All these shows...
It just goes on.
It's formulaic, which for a lot of people, that's fine. That's what they like. That's what they want. I got no problem with that.
They want to see how Liv solves this new murder.
And every murder mystery is a red herring. She gets the memory that says, oh, it was this thing. And then they confront them, and then the plot develops, and you're like, oh, it couldn't have been them because of that. And then she gets a new memory, and it's all, oh, now here's a slight other twist. It's all red herring mysteries. Like, it's not actually interesting. Well, I mean, I'm not saying it's. I shouldn't say it's not interesting. It's not interesting to me, exactly.
Yes. The thing that I'm curious about too is, I don't have anything against the writer, Rob Thomas.
Sure.
I don't know anything about
anything about him, honestly. I never watched any of his shows. Apparently, he wrote an episode of Space Ghost, and I guarantee you I enjoyed that because I love Space Ghost Coast to Coast. So I'll give him that. Apparently, I don't know the episode. I just read in his Wikipedia that his first TV writing credit was for an episode of Space Ghost in 1996, and that is like my favorite period of Space Ghost. So Space Ghost Coast to Coast specifically. So good for him. I'm sure he's a good writer. He's working in Hollywood. He knows
Veronica Mars blew up.
Veronica. Well, it got so many great reviews. It just didn't get the ratings. I don't know anything about it. It's not something that I'm interested in.
It's Arrested Development Center.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, he's a guy who knows, somebody wants what he's selling. So, good for him for capitalizing on that. Good for people for liking what they like. That's fine. I guess what I'm getting at is, despite how critical I am of this iZombie show, and I am pretty critical, as you may have noticed, I don't think there's anything trashy or incompetent or just objectively or technically bad. From a TV, judging it as a TV show, I think it's a perfectly competent show. The most negative thing I would say about it is that I think it's too formulaic, which, that is not good, but I wish it would.
That's subjectively not.
That's subjectively, it's subjectively not good. Right. So that's kind of my stance on the TV show. So
the thing I've been kind of thinking about toying around with is this is very much a CW show.
Okay.
If you've watched other CW shows,
I'll throw this out there. I have not watched any other CW shows because I don't watch television.
Right. It's got a very supernatural feel to it, the show Supernatural on CW. Okay. So seeing this, I'm not surprised, even in the slightest. Mm-hmm. In my mind, it makes me wonder how much of a different show, if any, we could have gotten if it would have been on a different network.
Oh, I'm sure it would have been different. I mean,
how different?
How different? I don't know.
I'm thinking.
It would be.
So, I don't know. And I don't know how much of this whole Liv trying to get her ex-fiance back, but then not trying to get him back.
I was so bored by that.
Oh, goodness. I don't care.
Yeah, talk about, when I talk about formulaic being bad, that's bad formula.
That takes
that was the most negative thing about, aspect of the show. The whole,
Yeah. Well, that's what people who watch the CW want to see.
They want. I get it. It's romantic drama. Fine.
Yeah. So, the even into the first issue of this book, because, spoiler alert, I have only read
these two
issues as we
We've only read the first 12 issues of the book.
Mm-hmm. Correct, as current.
Yes.
Before this, even before starting the show, I had only read the first 6. So, even the first issue of the book, I noticed how much of its charm it lost in the transition.
Oh, yeah.
And like we've said, it's almost not fair to compare them because they're so vastly different from one another. But
two completely different beasts.
Yes, and them not wanting to do the extended monster universe because that is a lot to explain to the modern TV viewer.
Well, it's not just. I don't think it's a lot to explain. Call me cynical, and you wouldn't be the first person to call me that. I'm cynical. I just think honestly, it's a matter of budget. It's easier to just do a show about zombies where in the world the zombie exists just because they took a bad drug and it turned him into a zombie. That's such a generic, easy.
I abhor that origin story.
I know it's not interesting at all. The way the oversoul undersoul philosophy is explored in the comic. It's just a drug that turns people into zombies, just like every other zombie movie you've seen in the last 15 years.
Yeah, and it's we're going to keep saying this word throughout this thing. It's a freebie. No one's going to question it. No one's going to they're just gonna go, oh, yep, that makes
It's just
sense.
easier. I get the decision made. Like, because
Yeah.
again, this kind of goes into this, like, part of this whole thing of like a lot of my part of it is just like, TV shows are expensive. Comics are not expensive. Now, comics are expensive. As somebody who's been producing comics, I can tell you how much money it costs to make a comic book. That is still nothing compared to how much it actually costs to make a TV show. A single person can make a comic. A single person cannot make a TV show. Like, that's the exponential cost of making a TV show. And the result of that is people that are putting money into it are a bit more money conscious, and they're a bit more they expect a certain return on their show, so they have expecting it to reach the most amount of people possible, meaning it has to be more and more and more generic. That's just the difference between something like a comic book or a regular book and a TV show on a major network. Just generally speaking, you're just not going to see really, really innovative stuff, something that's trying to be really innovative, because it's going to hurt the ratings. Which is
it's going to cost money.
Yeah, if somebody's putting money into it, they want to get those ratings. And so as a result, I think most TV is pretty generic, and that's a very, very cynical attitude to have. I accept that. I also don't think I'm wrong. I also don't care. Yeah.
Yes. So another knock against the show, because I unfortunately, even going into this saying I don't hate the show, I've got plenty to knock on it.
Sure.
So another knock. So as we go through the comic, the one thing that I always thought was kind of another funny gag was how much she absolutely hates to eat brains.
Right.
Hates it. Just they smell gross. They taste even worse. 4 episodes into the show, there's like no.
It
just doesn't even matter anymore.
Yeah.
It's a plot device, and all it is I'm gonna eat this brain so I can start this mystery. Like, it becomes a point of, throughout the book, it's always an ordeal about how much she doesn't want to do it. In the show, she's like popping it in like candy. And it's, I don't know, I don't really feel the fear of her like missing out on eating it anymore. Because that's always the thing of, there's always that fear of she's going to turn into a completely shambling zombie.
A monster.
Right? That's gone. That fear, that threat is gone. And they also kind of turn her zombie mode into a superpower.
Yeah,
and that made me
I saw that coming a mile away when she like. I mean, they do it in the first episode, how she survives getting run over by the car, and then she like goes into the second episode they talk about what they call it, full-on zombie mode, and that's like her superpower, is that she can just go into like mode and fight bad guys and whatever. I like the comic,
and I'm trying not to repeat it so hard, but man, that is the worst.
It's just it's a formula.
Yeah, it's a formula that people are going to eat up.
People are going to like it,
and they
did. The show's got great ratings, and I know people really like this show. And the good thing, I guess I should say, the fortunate thing about this TV show, the good thing about it being nothing like the comic, I guess you could say, like, which is good for the show, is that, comic books cater to a small audience. And so the TV show, I guess, is doing a good job of reaching a much larger audience. And hopefully, ideally, that will filter down and spill over and trickle down into more money for the comic book creators and more people getting turned on to the comics. Like, if for no other reason, I am so excited that this show exists, just so that Chris Roberson and Mike Allred hopefully got some royalty checks for the show being successful in a new medium. Just for Mike Allred drawing the introduction, the theme, the opening credits to the show. Mike Allred getting that job. I'm happy. I am so happy that people are making money. Comic book creators are making money specifically. And if that means making a show that I don't personally want to watch, but a bunch of other people do, that is great. Because I could care less. I could care less if the show goes on to be super successful, because what I care about is the comic, and the comic is great, and the comic isn't going anywhere.
What this has done is it has actually made at least 12 people I know personally, just a handful of people that I know personally go, wow, I didn't know this was made after a comic.
Right, exactly. And
I'm going to go check the comic out. And that's all I can really ask for, to be honest.
That's great.
If it's a show I don't want to watch, and I don't, all I can say is, hey, the comic's really good, you should check that out.
Absolutely. And I actually should amend my statement. Just a second ago, I said I could care less if it goes on to be successful. I actually want it to go on to be really successful. I think that's great. I think if a lot of people watch this show and the show becomes super successful, then that's only good for the book. It's not going to hurt the book in any way for the show to be successful. If anything, it would hurt the book for the show not to be successful. So I don't maybe it sounds like sour grapes when I complain about this TV show because it's nothing like the book. And I won't deny maybe there's a little bit to that, because I would actually like to see a really colorful TV show that has the cast of characters.
There is things that I would like to see that didn't make it a transition.
I would like to see a show that's more like the comic, because I think that would make for a fun TV series. But I also I also don't care, because I want to just read the comic anyway. The TV show really wouldn't, like, I said some. It's interesting because we're talking about this. We recently, I did an episode not too long ago with Chris McJunkin where we talked about Preacher, and there's an upcoming Preacher TV show in the works.
Right.
And I made kind of a grandiose statement when we were talking about that, and ultimately, and it still remains true. Ultimately, I don't care whether or not a show is successfully adapted from a comic book. I do care for all the reasons I just said. It's better for the creators. I want people to make money. I am a greedy capitalist, and I think it's great when artists can make money off their art. So I do care.
I'm a fan of that too.
Exactly. Personally, I don't need it for my enjoyment. I am somebody who would rather read comic books, and I do not, for my own justification of my love of comics, I do not need a comic book to become successful as a movie or a TV show to justify my love of comics. A lot of people, they want something to be successful in the mainstream, because then that makes them feel more accepted in the mainstream. Like if a bunch of people, everybody loves the Avengers movies now, and so now people that read comics can be like, yes, I'm a part of the group. I look at that with contempt, and I spit on those people, and I say, Patooey, I am an unlikable outsider, and I don't need your acceptance. Go away. But the other side of me is still happy that things are successful and that, artists are making money. Now, I should clarify in my example, that's not happening with the Marvel movies. Jack Kirby and Jack Kirby's family ain't getting anything out of all the characters and the style that he created that the Disney is making money off of. But that's a totally different rant, and we're not going down that road.
No, we're not. I was going to say, do you remember when we were talking about iZombie?
Exactly,
just
yeah.
a little bit ago?
That is something else, and we're not going down that road. So, but...
One of the last things that I would like to say,
sure.
One of the last things that I can think to say, rather, is I don't want a absolutely verbatim transition if I were to be watching a larger live action interpretation of a comic. I don't want it verbatim. That is personally why I didn't like Watchmen, because it was verbatim and the stuff that changed.
Well, I was about to say that's a tricky thing to say, because the problem is with the Watchmen movie is that it wasn't verbatim. There was lots of stuff that was changed, and it was all terrible.
Yeah, like the stuff that was the same was, whatever. But then the stuff that changed was just nonsense.
Yeah, but that's just a problem with Zack Snyder not being a good director. But I guess that's another road we're not going down.
Yes. So I don't want a verbatim transition.
I also don't think
I like to see those little changes, as long as they're actually well thought out, creatively done. And this show was set up to be. This was what it was going to be. There was really no way around it. I knew it was going to be a murder of the week formula show.
Right. Exactly.
I have no problem having things change in the transition. It's really unfortunate that there weren't a few things applied to the show from the book. You know, none of the side characters. I don't care about any of the side characters at
Right.
all.
Because they're not
And
colorful or fun or
it,
interesting the way they are in the comic.
no, they're just generic
See,
sitcom, or they're just generic
and that's
formula
another thing
characters.
to me. I don't mean to derail you too much, but just talking
No, I
about
mean
how,
yeah.
like the iZombie TV show, it's such a TV show. It looks like a TV show. It's written like a TV show. All the characters talk like TV characters, and that's actually part of my biggest problem with it. I get a little irritated because it's like Mike Allred does that opening theme, and it's all Mike Allred's art, drawing all the characters, and it's like his colorful pop art, and then it just goes into like boring, drab TV show. Like the show is not colorful the way the comic is colorful.
No.
It's just, I've seen like okay, like I'm just gonna throw this out there. In my first comparison in the first episode, when I say it's gonna be this formulaic TV show, I compared it to the show Pushing Daisies, and I think that there is a very large comparison to Pushing Daisies. I know you haven't seen Pushing Daisies, Luke. Pushing Daisies was a show some years back at this point. It was about it was sort of like a similar like fantasy setup. Like in iZombie, Gwen or Liv in the TV show is a zombie, and when she eats somebody's brain, she gets their memories, and she teams up with her detective friend to solve the mystery. In the show Pushing Daisies, the main character, who is a pie maker, he's got his own like pie restaurant and he sells pies. He has this ability, nobody knows how he got it. When he touches a dead body, they come back to life. And so a private detective discovers that he has this ability and basically forces him to be his partner, so that whenever the detective wants to solve a mystery, he grabs the pie maker, they go to the morgue, the pie maker touches the dead body, the person comes to life, and they grill them for questions on, like, what happened to you, how'd you die, and then we're going to go solve the murder mystery and, get paid for it.
Literally replace the characters and you have iZombie.
Exactly. It's very similar to that of, like, somebody who doesn't want to necessarily be solving murder mysteries, but has a magic power, which helps them solve murder mysteries, and they're teamed up with somebody who does want to solve murder mysteries, and they're exploiting that power to a degree. I mean, in iZombie, it's more of a...
She works there.
Well, she works there, and the detective doesn't know what her power is. The detective thinks she's psychic, which, of course, now we're just basically iZombie is just mixing Pushing Daisies and the show Psych, and putting them together to become a new show.
With a zombie coat of paint.
Exactly, with a zombie coat of paint.
Kind of.
Now, the only reason
it's there, like,
the only
a
reason I bring up this comparison so much is because Pushing Daisies, the TV show, was so colorful. It had such a vibrant visual style. It looked different from regular TV shows. It was very interesting, and it really, really played with this fantasy nature of the whole book, and it really played with the contrasting themes of life and death, light and dark. So there's so much color in this book, but then it's also about this really dark subject matter of people dying and murder and love and betrayal and relationships. So there's this really beautiful use of contrast, how there's so much color and so much dark. And in iZombie, there's like none of that. Like it just looks like a TV show. It's mostly filmed at night. It's
or in the morgue.
Yeah, or in the morgue, where it's all interior sets with like basic TV lighting. It's all flat and it's all boring. And that, to me, that's my criticism of the show that has nothing to do with like, okay, it's not adapted from the comic book, fine. When I look at it, I look at iZombie the show and I'm like, okay, so it's like a mix of Pushing Daisies and a mix of Psych without anything that made either of those shows interesting. It's like I look at it as kind of like a cynical TV show adaptation. I wasn't that interested in it, and I'm trying not to just like harp on about it because I don't want to give it a bunch of negative reviews, because obviously I'm like the only person on the planet who didn't like it, because it's got so many people liking the show.
Well, a lot of people that like the show, like I said, not a clue that it was based off the comic.
But
they just thought it was like an original.
But I'm not
concept.
even talking about it like being based on as an original concept. I guess it's it's sort of an interesting hook, you know, eats the brain, you know, gets the memories. But I look at the show as an original concept because they didn't take anything from the comic. As an original concept, I look at it as like a cynical television show, like it's taking.
It just feels like it's cashing in on zombie craze.
Well, I won't say that because I mean, Walking Dead pretty much already.
Well, yeah,
Walking Dead does
exist.
Walking Dead does exist, and it is doing gangbusters. And when Walking Dead came out, everybody thought that zombies were done and you can't make money with zombies anymore. People were sick of zombies, and then Walking Dead goes on to be the most like successful thing ever. And they make that joke.
I heard a little bit of spite in your voice.
I'm sorry,
there.
I didn't mean any spite in that. I have no. I like the comic just fine. I just haven't watched the show because, as established, I just really don't watch that many TV shows. No, that's good for Robert Kirkman for having one of the most Robert Kirkman has one of the best comic book writer careers ever. Like, he skyrocketed into success, into like the top 0.01% of success that most comic book writers wish they could do. Good on him for doing that. But I kind of got a little derailed here with my bitter cynicism of TV.
Yeah, let's
basically what I was getting at though is like, you know, even not even judging the show not as an adaptation from a very great, interesting, cool comic, I found the TV show to be not that interesting. Like I just listed 2 shows that I thought were more interesting than iZombie, Pushing Daisies and Psych.
I have watched Psych. And I love Psych.
And Psych is pretty formulaic. Honestly, when we start talking about murder mystery shows, I'd rather watch Monk, because I do like Monk. But I will watch Psych, and I think that there's good chemistry there. I think that iZombie has nothing new or interesting to say that is not already said on other shows. Maybe that'll get developed later on. I don't know. I also don't really care. I hope the show continues to be successful so that everybody can keep making money, though. Because I like money.
Well said.
Beautiful money.
And I really, really hope people that like the show investigate a little and get the comic.
And most importantly, I hope people, even if it's just a small percentage, just like 1% the people watching the show, and they say, oh, this is based on a comic, this show's kind of interesting, and maybe they're at a comic book shop for some weird reason, and they see iZombie.
No, they just go to Comic-Con.
Yeah, there are lots of people at Comic-Con that have never read iZombie, but I guarantee you they will have been watching the show, and maybe they'll find a trade paperback on discount, and they'll buy it, and that's great. I
mean, that happened with Walking Dead. Like, I know a handful of people that didn't know Walking Dead was a comic somehow. And saw it at a con, picked it up, and now they're hooked on the comic.
So it's great.
There's a silver lining.
I'm not taking like a spiteful position. I do not wish the show like failed. I do not just because the show is not made for me. That does not affect me in any way. I just am listing all the reasons why I have no interest in watching it. But I hope other people do, and I also more sincerely hope that they will then read the comic because the comic is great.
Yeah. That's kind of it.
Yeah,
I think.
I
think we dried that well.
I beat that horse.
Oh, you beat it pretty hard.
That horse a couple of times.
Yeah.
So, but
overall, like I said, my original opinion when we started talking about the show, I think it's a perfectly crafted CW show.
Sure.
I think it's not like the absolute most awful show ever.
I mean, it looks like it fits right in, like with other TV shows.
It's a perfect fall lineup show.
I'm sure people that are watching whatever is on CW, I don't know,
Flash.
I'm sure most people are perfectly comfortable just sitting down and watching all the new episodes. iZombie will fit right in with all of that, and you know that's good for them. That's how they get their entertainment.
Yep.
Ugh.
Let's just end it on.
I'll end it on that positive, the little positive burp.
Yeah, there's the iZombie TV show. The iZombie books are great. Please go check them out.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to.
I would hope we do.
Oh no, we're going to. What I was going to say is I think we're going to do it pretty soon. Like, I mean, not like next week or anything, but we won't wait a year before we
Why don't we do it for your Halloween episode?
That would make sense, wouldn't it, to do it really quick?
Because the weekend before that, Halloween's on a Saturday.
It is, yes.
So we can just record.
So next month, next month we'll do a little over a month. We'll do Volume 3.
Yep.
And
awesome.
yeah, we'll just chug on along.
I'll be very drunk for that. Don't worry.
Excellent. By then, the second season of iZombie will have started, and we'll see whether or not it can keep up its ratings and success. I'm not being cynical here. I sincerely hope it does.
Yes.
So,
send us off?
Yeah. I think I've pretty much said as much as I could say about iZombie. Thank you, everybody, if you managed to sit through that whole diatribe and that rant and that insane rambling by an insane outsider and Luke also. Luke is here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. My name is Aaron Walther. You can find comics that I have written. Not that you would want to read them because you guys all like watching television shows. I promised myself I wasn't going to be cynical.
Say it again.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. You can... God dang it. Now I messed myself up. Thank you, everybody, for listening. My name is Aaron Walther. You can find comics that I have written at my website, newhavencomics.com, as well as aaronwalther.com. You can find new episodes of this very podcast at comicdna.podbean.com, and we are also on iTunes. Just search us on iTunes. You can find us, and there are lots of episodes of me ranting about comic books, mostly positive, because I want to talk positively about comics.
The comic ones
are positive. If you just listen to this podcast, you would maybe just think that I'm mostly just a big cheerleader, but I have a reputation among my friends of being an unpleasable cynic. And this little rant about the iZombie TV show was just a tiny glimpse into that reputation and why it is well deserved. So, yes, you can find more episodes of this podcast at comicdna.podbean.com, as I just said. You can find me on Facebook if you want to find me and tell me how stupid I am for not liking TV shows. I am Aaron Walther on Facebook, and I am also on Twitter at AAWALTHER on Twitter. That's at AAWalther. And I don't use social media that much, but I will respond to anything anybody says to me. Maybe, unless I don't feel like it. Luke, where can people find you? Or why would they want to?
Why would they want to? No, there's no reason yet. I haven't released any graphic design material yet, so no one needs to find me. But if you would like to, I'm on Twitter at Luke T. Moritz, Moritz. I post general ramblings, graphic design updates, shirts that I'm creating. Yes. Come check me out.
Super duper. Well, I think that'll do it. Next episode, we're going to get back into our classic superhero comic book roots. We're going to be talking about we're going to be talking about another comic book series and another media adaptation. In this case, we're going to be talking about the classic X-Men comic, Days of Future Past, and we'll be talking about the movie adaptation of it as well that came out last year, I think. Is that correct? Last year? Mm-hmm. I will have, hopefully, fingers crossed, I got 2 special guests lined up. Seth Ferranti, true crime author, that was just on a few episodes back when we talked about Criminal, and my good friend Alex Harner, who occasionally shows up to talk about the X-Men and any Pulp Hope book that we might do. Just a few episodes ago, we did Battling Boy with Alex. So, come back next week, we'll be talking about X-Men. I'm sure there are plenty of you that have no interest in listening to me talk about the X-Men, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I like talking about the X-Men. So thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see y'all next time.